Hello there and welcome to the news at this time. My name is Frama Pani and my sign language interpreter is Ada Uno. First, the headlines. President Bola Tinubu nominates tax czar Taiwo Oyedele as Minister of State for Finance. Nigerians bank on Dangote refinery for stability as U.S.-Israel war with Iran rattles global energy sector. And former Senegalese president enters UN Secretary General race. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has nominated Taiwo Oyedele as the Minister of State for Finance, replacing Dr. Doris Anita Uzoka. Anita Uzoka will now move to the Ministry of Budget and National Planning as the Minister of State, her third portfolio in the administration. President Tinubu has today conveyed the nomination of Oyedele to the Senate for confirmation in a letter to the Senate President Godswill Akpabio. Until President Tinubu nominated him as minister, Oyedele from Ikaram, Akoko, Ondo State was the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, which overhauled Nigeria's tax system. Oyedele, 50, is an economist, accountant, and public policy expert. Now, the war in the Middle East has created uncertainty in the global oil and gas business. The Arabian Gulf, which produces more than 20% of global energy, has seen production halts and some facilities in the industry have come under attack. Musa Baba Aliyu takes a look at oil production and the major routes for oil and gas exports.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical maritime checkpoints. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the broader Indian Ocean, lying between Iran to the north and Oman's Mossadeq enclave and the United Arab Emirates. This narrow waterways is vital for global energy trade, serving as the primary export route for oil and liquefied natural gas (LNG) from major producers in the Persian Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Kuwait, and Iran. It links these resources to key markets in Asia, Europe, North America, and Africa. As of recent data, 1/5, about 20 to 21% of global oil consumption and significant portion of seaborne petroleum products and LNG pass through the strait, equating to roughly 20 to 21 million barrels per day of oil equivalent on average. The strait is geopolitically vulnerable due to its geography. At its narrowest point, it is about 35 to 50 kilometers wide, with shipping lanes even narrower and water depths in parts as shallow as 50 to 60 meters in key areas. This makes it susceptible to disruption via mines, missiles, fast-track boats, submarines, drones, or other asymmetric tactics. As of March 1st, 2026, the situation has escalated dramatically following joint U.S. and Israel military strikes on Iran that began on February 28, 2026. Iran has issued warnings via VHF radio transmission that no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz, describing passage as unsafe. This has created fear that the development could choke off global oil supplies and send prices soaring above $100 a barrel. It is also reported that about $600 billion of global business of crude oil and LNG will be affected. Brent crude oil has already jumped 10% to about $80 a barrel over the counter on Sunday. The global oil benchmark has rallied this year and reached $73 a barrel on Friday for its highest since July, buoyed by growing concerns over the potential attacks that arrived a day later. Middle East leaders have warned President Donald Trump that a war on Iran could lead to oil prices jumping to more than $100 a barrel. Musa Baba Aliyu, NTA News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that the war with Iran could last longer than initially projected, saying Washington has the capability to continue military operations well beyond the 4 to 5 weeks time frame first outlined. Francis Utojo has details.
The conflict with a strike that killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has repeatedly expanded across the region. The United States and Israel say their objectives include destroying Iran's missile systems, naval forces and nuclear program, as well as halting its support for armed groups. Trump said the campaign was progressing ahead of schedule, but stressed it would not become an endless war. Iran has retaliated with missile and drone attacks targeting Israel and U.S. allies in the Gulf. 2 drones struck the U.S. embassy in Riyadh, causing minor damage, while Saudi Arabia said it intercepted additional drones over its territory. Tehran has also threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz, a vital corridor for global oil shipments. The violence has spread to Lebanon, where Israeli airstrikes hit Beirut's southern suburbs following attacks claimed by Hezbollah. Casualty figures occurred in both sides of Iran, Israel, and the U.S. Amid the escalating crisis, Washington has urged U.S. citizens in dozens of countries across the Middle East to leave as fears grow of a prolonged and widening regional war. Francis Udojo, NT News.
Now, the second meeting of the ECOWAS heads of national television stations has opened in Cotonou, Republic of Benin. The meeting is a consolidation of the inaugural meeting in Abuja, Nigeria in 2024, which was chaired by NTA's Director General Salihu Abdulhamid Dambas, represented by the Executive Director News, Ayo Adewuyi. The Cotonou meeting will feature interactive discussions on the strategic role of public media in combating disinformation in the sub-region and review the level of implementation of and the recommendation from the last Director General's meeting in each member state, identification of obstacles and approaches to solutions, especially contribution of public media to stability, regional integration and community citizenship. NTA's Director General is being represented at the Cotonou meeting by the Executive Director News, Ayo Adewuyi. And as security concerns heightened over the proliferation of illicit weapons, the West African Network on Small Arms has convened critical stakeholders to strengthen strategies and advance recommendations aimed at improving arduous implementation of the United Nations Small Arms Control Frameworks. Defense correspondent Ismail Musa has details of the engagement.
The proliferation of illicit small arms and light weapons continues to pose serious threats to peace and security in Nigeria and across ECOWAS region, fueling criminal activities and armed violence. In a strategic move to strengthen national and regional security, the West African Network on Small Arms convened stakeholders at a high-level consultative meeting aimed at reinforcing Nigeria's implementation of the United Nations Programme of Action and the International Tracing Instrument on Small Arms Control. The meeting brought together government officials, security agencies, traditional institutions, civil society groups, and policy experts to review Nigeria's progress in combating the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons while identifying gaps requiring urgent attention.
We have a very significant role to play in this aspect of small arms control. There are already some laws on the ground, but implementation of these laws are not actually being effective.
You can't make recommendations that will be kept in view. We are going to use the ones that are very practicable in line with Nigerian realities so that we can move ahead. If we have that political will to implement some of the policies, we will go far.
As Nigeria and other ECOWAS member states prepare for the 9th biennial meeting of states, the group is advocating stronger regional cooperation and a unified approach to effectively tackle the proliferation of illicit weapons. In Abuja, Ismail Musa, NTA News.
And former Senegalese President Macky Sall has officially entered the race to become the United Nations new Secretary General. The world body confirmed that Saul, who led the country from 2012 to 2024, was nominated for the top job by Burundi. Francis Udocho has the report.
Despite achievements during his tenure as president, Macky Sall continues to face criticism at home, notably accusations that his administration hid the true extent of the country's fiscal problems. The world body will elect a new Secretary General to replace outgoing Chief Antonio Guterres this year for a 5-year term starting on 1st January 2027. Traditionally, the job rotates among regions, but when Guterres, who is Portuguese, was elected in 2016, it was supposed to be Eastern Europe's turn. The next on the list is Latin America. Saul joins 2 other formally nominated candidates, former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet and Argentine diplomat Rafael Grossi, who currently heads the International Atomic Energy Agency. Costa Rica has also put forward its former Vice President Rebecca Gripspan, but the letter of candidacy has not yet been officially submitted to the UN. This election comes amid a growing push for the United Nations to choose the first female Secretary General in its 80-year history. The Security Council must begin the selection process by the end of July. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe has commenced the release of nearly 4,000 inmates under a presidential amnesty in a bid to ease overcrowding in the country's prisons. It was announced by the cabinet in February. On the same day, it approved changes to the constitution as part of a plan to extend President Emerson Mnangagwa's term till 2030. The order grants a general amnesty to specific categories of convicted inmates as authorized by the President.
The 2026 amnesty is targeted and merit-based, focusing on vulnerable groups and those who have demonstrated significant progress in their rehabilitation.
The move has been described by opposition figures as a constitutional coup. Francis Dojo, NTA News.
And World Wildlife Day, observed annually on March 3rd, following its proclamation by the United Nations General Assembly in 2013, is highlighting the urgent need to protect wild fauna and flora. Charles Alpha reports that this year's celebration centers on medicinal and aromatic plants, conserving health, heritage, and livelihoods. Wildlife 2026 Day highlights role in sustaining ecosystems, economies, and human well-being.
Across continents, attention is turning to the urgent need to safeguard nations' most valuable resources as Wildlife Day 2026 is observed.
This is to give credence to the efforts of park rangers, game guards working in the game reserves, forest guards working in the forest areas, and even those working in green areas.
The annual event shines a spotlight on biodiversity and the role it plays on sustaining life on Earth. With this year's theme, medicinal and aromatic plants, conserving health, heritage, and livelihoods, the focus is on plant species that support healthcare systems and cultural tradition worldwide. Many Nigerians rely on medicinal plants.
Once you are able to control the activities of man, half of your job in wildlife conservation is done. That's why we say wildlife management is human management.
For primary health care, these plants are also a source of income for rural communities involved in harvesting and trade. Experts warn that urgent action is needed to prevent further loss, and stakeholders are calling for sustainable practices, support policies, and greater public awareness. Conservationists say protecting plants is just as important as protecting animals. World Wildlife Day 2026 serves as a reminder that safeguarding biodiversity protects health, supports livelihoods, and secures the future. Charles Alpha, NTA News.
Right, you're watching the news on NTA International. We take a short break. More news right after. Right, thanks for staying tuned. Now, before the break, we brought to you a report by our environment correspondent, Charles Alpha, on the importance of conserving wildlife. Now, joining us live by Zoom to advance the conversation is Dr. Ofua Mark, West Africa Representative, Wildlife Africa. Dr. Mark, thanks for joining us on the news.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Now, what does the 2026 World Wildlife Day theme mean for countries like Nigeria facing rising biodiversity loss?
Well, the World Wildlife Day is a day set aside to bring to the front of the news, the front burner, our environmental issues. And this year, the theme actually centers on the viability of the forest and society. Telling us that, look, we cannot, living in our concrete forest in the city, do away with the natural world, the environment where we find ourselves. So we have the theme for this year bringing to the front the importance of medicinal and aromatic plants for our own benefits.
Right. Now, how serious is the threat of poaching and habitat destruction to Nigeria's wildlife today?
Nigeria has lost a huge part of its biodiversity to poaching and habitat destruction. And even as we speak, these losses are ongoing. We have lost over 70-80% of our primary forests. Our wildlife, our animals, they are, on the brink of extinction. And then also forest medicinal plants and beneficial plants from the forest, they are disappearing, So we are at the brink. We must do something now as a nation, as a society, as a community to reverse this trend. If not, we are going to suffer for it.
Okay. Doctor, can you share with us what practical steps government and citizens too can take to protect endangered species and natural habitats?
Thank you very much for that question. That is a great question, because when we talk about environment and how things have gone bad, everybody tends to, focus on the government and look at them for what is next. But truly, it's a job for everybody. The government, you and I, NGOs, societies, communities, we must all come together. Now, the government has a crucial role to play, and the government of Nigeria, under the current administration, has shown very strong sense of responsibility when it comes to environmental matters. In fact, as I speak to you, the houses of assembly, the Senate and the Rep, they've recently passed a bill. It has passed through the Rep, it has passed through the Senate, that is poised to take environmental protection for Nigeria from the relegation zone to the top of the league, so to say. We have a new bill, and it's just waiting for the assent by the president to sign it into law. Once this law comes into play, I'm telling you, it's going to be a major game changer, because it addresses all the problems. We are waiting with our breath held for the president to sign this into law, and once it gets in, the NGOs and other environmental authorities, Nigeria, we're taking this message out to the street so that you and I, we know the part that we have to play. And then the communities that we have around our forest, they have a crucial role to play. Okay. Because this forest degradation, habitat loss, and killing of the animals, they pass through this community. So they have a role to play. We must partner with them, let them see themselves as stakeholder in the health of the forest, in the health of the nation. When all these parties come together to play, then we would start making meaningful changes in wildlife matters in Nigeria.
Dr. Ofua, I must thank you so much for coming on the news and sharing your thoughts with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Still talking environmental matters. Now, Nigeria is shifting from climate promises to climate action with the official flag-off of the Renewed Hope Climate Change Awareness Tour. The nationwide initiative launched by President Bola Tinubu is designed to take climate conversations beyond policy documents and into communities, market, farms, and classrooms. Let's hear from Charles Alpha.
Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It is here. Its effects respect no religion, ethnicity, race, gender, or age. From flood displacing communities to advancing desertification and coastal erosion, the impact is real. This gathering reflects a shared determination to confront these challenges, envisioned by President Bola Tinubu and launched on his behalf by the Minister of Environment, Balarabi Abbas Lawal. The Renewed Hope Climate Change Awareness Tour is urging governors, the private sector and other stakeholders to lead Nigeria's climate transition and turn awareness into action.
Together we will turn awareness into action. We will turn action into investment. We will turn investment into a stronger, greener, more resilient Nigeria.
Today's event marks the beginning of a nationwide movement to deepen public awareness and understanding of climate risks and opportunities.
Nigeria's pathway is clear. The United Nations remain committed to support the federal government in translating climate ambition into a real, measurable climate action.
The Renewed Hope Climate Awareness Tour represents the next phase of this national transformation.
What we launched today is part of the things that will bring about solutions, how we have to push back the desert, how we have to find ways to tackle the issue of drought.
We have an annual $20 billion gap in terms of what we require to meet our nationally determined contributions. And the only way we're going to achieve that is through a whole of society approach.
Stakeholders also called for harmonization of climate frameworks to build local capacity and drive long-term adaptation to community risks. Charles Alpha, NTA News.
The federal government has reaffirmed Nigeria's dedication to fortifying its agricultural innovation ecosystem through the complete enforcement of the Plant Variety Protection PVP Act 2021. The act aligns with the 1991 Act of the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, representing a landmark advancement in modernizing the country's plant breeding and seed regulation framework. Musa Babali reports.
In 2021, Nigeria enacted the Plant Variety Protection Act, which regulates and protects seed production, innovation and plant breeding. The legislation aims to ensure intellectual property protection for new plant varieties, considering that Nigeria is one of the largest seed-producing countries in West Africa. The bootcamp is part of the wider efforts to enhance capacity in coordinating early generation seed production and promoting the scaling of climate-resilient and nutrient-rich crop varieties to support food security. The Director General of the National Agricultural Seeds Council, Fatou Mohammed, said during the 2026 bootcamp that while enacting the PVP legislation was a historic milestone, meaningful impact requires skilled professionals, including competent administration, plant breeders, legal experts, and policy specialists who grasp both national responsibilities and international benchmarks.
Nigeria is not merely adopting a framework. We are building a functional and sustainable innovation system.
The Chief Registrar of the Patent and Design Office in the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment, Jem Igwe, urged Nigeria's intellectual property framework to fully align with international standards amid rapid advances in biotechnology, gene editing, and hybrid development.
In Nigeria today, like I said, we have the 16 research institutions that have different mandate crops. Those breeders need to be encouraged to be introducing newer varieties that are highly productive and to farmers.
Organizers said the boot camp aims to build a resilient, transparent, and globally aligned framework that supports agricultural productivity and long-term food security. Musa Baba Aliyu, NTA News.
In other news, 5 officers have been detained at the end of a joint investigation by Department of State Services, DSS, Nigeria Immigration Service, NIS, Nigeria Customs Service, NCS, and Federal Ministry of Aviation over alleged compromise in El Rufai Airport incident. They are Ayuba Yakubu, ASP, Police, Murtala Inuwa, DSS, Najib Murtala, NIS, Musa Adamu, Aviation Security, and Salihu Victor, Aviation Security. A statement by the DSS said they have all confessed to receiving bribes to facilitate unauthorized entry into restricted areas to obstruct lawful security operation in an unprecedented manner. They have been handed over to Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, for prosecution. Others from NIS and NTS whose involvement is not criminal, that is, did not receive bribe but abuse their uniforms to facilitate unauthorized access, will face administrative action. And up next, weather forecast. That's it on the news. Thanks for being a part of it. My name is Frama Panyi, and Adao No has been your sign language interpreter.